Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today from Classroom to Community, Fostering Engagement and Impact through Experiential Learning. On this next slide here, each of the presenters will present themselves and then we'll get started. All right, I am Casey Coombs. I'm a professional practice assistant professor in the Department of Nutrition, Dietetics, and Food Sciences. I teach classes primarily for the Masters of Public Health program within our department in the College of Agriculture and Applied Sciences, and I'm also the faculty director of the Student Nutrition Access Center, also known as SNAC.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mateja Savoie Roskos. I'm an associate dean for the College of Agriculture and Applied Sciences, and then I'm also an associate professor in the Department of Nutrition, Dietetics, and Food Sciences. And like Casey, I primarily teach courses for our public health program, but in my 12 plus years of experience here at USU, have taught courses that ranged from dietetics, nutrition science, and to public health.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jayme Walters. I'm an assistant professor of social work. And then I am the director of the Transforming Communities Institute, and our institute focuses on community engaged research and solution building across the state of Utah. I also do a lot of experiential learning with undergraduate researchers, as well as community partners interested in working with students on projects. We do a lot of course-based work with the Transforming Communities Institute, so I'll be talking about that a little bit later.
Great. Well, I will get us started really by defining experiential learning, talking about some of the benefits of it and ways that it can be integrated into a course or a program. And really, experiential learning was kind of founded by David Kolb, although there have been other authors along the way who have published on the topic as well. But he started publishing and researching experiential learning actually back in the 80s. And he defines it as the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. And really recognizing that students learn the most by doing and by reflecting on their experiences. And that I think we will focus a little bit on this in this presentation, because I do believe it's a component that can often get forgotten about during the experiential learning process. There are a lot of different ways that this stimulates academic inquiry. It promotes interdisciplinary learning, where students are learning from individuals in other fields, in other programs, with varying experiences. It promotes civil engagement, where students are getting the opportunity to really engage in their communities and see the benefits of that. They're getting career development and leadership skills that can obviously not only benefit them now as students, but when they're professionals. It promotes and improves that cultural awareness, and also really just helps develop them with a whole host of skills that they'll utilize within their careers. This is Kolb's model here, and you can find this online with a lot of different variations, but there are always four components of it: abstract conceptualization, active experimentation, concrete experiences, and then the reflective observation. And this is a cyclical process. And so maybe starting with abstract conceptualization, this is really where students are connecting ideas. They're thinking about what they've already learned, how that connects with information that they're currently learning, and really trying to kind of broaden that understanding. Then going into active experimentation, they're taking that information that they've learned, that they're engaging with currently, and they're formulating a hypothesis and planning an action of, how to test it and what they might find. And then they're getting that concrete experience, which I think is oftentimes what most people think of when they think of experiential learning. They're getting that hands-on experience where they're testing something out, they're trying something, they're seeing what happens. And then that last component being that reflective observation, really ensuring that the students have the time and are intentionally analyzing their experience, but also thinking about and hearing the experiences from other individuals so that they're able to hear different viewpoints to really represent a variety of perspectives. Here are some of the learning benefits from including experiential learning within a course or a program. There are many more, but these are some of the most research-based. This experiential learning really makes learning more relatable for students, which oftentimes, if it's more relatable, students are more engaged and more interested in kind of continuing that learning process. It really helps link theory to practice and other really taking abstract concepts and ideas and really helping students be able to see how they apply in a real world setting. As you can imagine, it assists with that memory retention. So as you probably know, we retain much more when we are doing things or when we're teaching things rather than when we're reading about it in a book. It increases the effectiveness of learning, and because it assists with that memory retention, I'd also argue that it increases the efficiency of our learning process. And it increases student engagement with other students, with the organizations and companies, their communities, which provides a whole host of other benefits. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it really leads to skill development that students will utilize for a lifetime. Next slide, thank you. So here are some examples of experiential learning. There are many more. I know oftentimes people are worried as to how they can weave in experiential learning into their courses or their programs, recognizing that how it's done is going to vary based on the field. So what you do in a math course or in a math program may look very different than in chemistry or in my field of public health and nutrition science. And really trying to look at what types of experiential learnings would be most influential for students and most naturally weaved into a curriculum. Okay, I'm going to take the time now and pass it over to Jayme, who's going to focus on the roadmap for experiential learning.
All right, so this roadmap really is the nuts and bolts of Kolb's model. So I will say, as Mateja was talking about the different types of experience options, this may not capture all of those, but I think you can utilize the general framework to work through the planning of any of those options. So, this is really based on this, like the development, intervention, evaluation model, or the assessment, intervention, and evaluation model, if you just think about it in those kind of three areas. But this breaks it down just a little bit more. So where I like to start is with a needs assessment. And so what this is looking at is really just starting to gather a lot of information before you dive into the planning piece. And the most important question that you need to answer first is who is involved. And so if we're talking about undergraduate students or graduate students, sometimes for us in social work or with the institute, it often starts with a community partner, which Casey will talk about in a little bit. So if it starts with a community partner, then it's a community engaged project. And so that is one of the important questions you need to ask up front, because those needs will differ based on who is a part of the project. And then as we know who is a part of it, then we need to really explore their backgrounds, because what a student who is in their second year at university as an undergraduate, what they know and what they've experienced is very different from someone who might be a graduate level student, a master's or a PhD level student. Their learning goals and their needs and what they have training on previously is going to look very different. And then similarly with a community partner, this is really essential in that when we're working with a community partner, like a nonprofit, for example, that we're elevating their needs and that we're putting forth this idea of reciprocity, that certainly learning is a piece of this. We're working with students, but that it needs to, to be a project that's beneficial for that partner, that it's not all this work and they get nothing back in the end. So what is the lens and discipline? Sometimes, there are multiple disciplines at the table, especially if you're teaching like a gen ed class and you have lots of people there, or, you have community partners who have different trainings. So it's important to think about where these individuals are coming from. And then similarly, in the applied professions, many times we have competencies that we have to think about because, we have accreditation standards to meet. So if this class is a part of that, then, or a project is a part of that, then you want to make sure that that's built in. So what are those competencies that this project or the class is covering? What are the learning objectives? So I'll talk a bit more about that later, but really it's good to think about in general, what are these going to be for this class or this project or this experience so that we can start down the right path. What is a learning delivery method? So, at the university, we have so many different options for how projects and classes and learning experiences in general are delivered. So is this something that's in person? Is it asynchronous, online? Is it, here at USU, the Connect mode where we have students who are all over the state? So really have to think critically about, what are those delivery options or requirements, and make sure that you are planning a project around that and make sure that it's effective. How much time do you have? This is can become a real challenge for folks who have these really amazing ideas, and then they might have a semester to get it done. And so it's important to be realistic about what time you have available and make sure that the work that you're doing can be accomplished in that time frame. Because even though people say that they want to continue, this is, I think, especially applicable to students, sometimes it's just not possible for them to continue based on whatever their schedule, their, other reasons that impact their capacity to continue. So it's important to make sure that you establish that up front. The planning part one. Again, I really like to approach setting learning objectives and outcomes collaboratively with the people that are involved in the project. I think that regardless of whether or not it's community engaged, I think that's an important component of any kind of experiential learning. But I think you have to sort of set in before you get too deep into the, like, for example, a class, you have to have some kind of learning objective so that you could plan some of the course, right? Or plan some of the project and the assignments that go along with it. You would need to identify resources needed. So people, stuff meaning equipment, supplies, other kinds of materials, space, again, how much time do you have for the project, but also how much time do people need to give who are part of the project? The knowledge. So if I don't have the knowledge, or the students don't have the knowledge, or the partners we're working with don't have the knowledge, do we need to provide some kind of training to go along with this? And then a communication mechanism. I can't emphasize this enough to make sure that this is established up front. How are we going to communicate? When are we going to communicate? How often? To make sure that that's a part of your agreements up front is really essential. And then mapping out a timeline with learning objectives and the student assessment strategies. So again, this is very discipline specific. It's very, whatever option you choose for experiential learning, it's very specific to that. But, you have to make that a part of your planning up front. Planning part two. So this is, I think, some pieces that sometimes people forget to think about whenever they are so excited about putting this together, is the process evaluation. So we have the student component where, of course, we want to make sure that they're learning something and they're getting the part, if we have another partner, that they're getting something out of it. But then what we forget sometimes is like the process. Did this go well? So planning for that along the way. So formative, that like, where are the checkpoints? How are we assessing for how this is going? Do we need to make revisions in this process? And then the summative. So at the end, like, how do we evaluate what happened in this process, and did it go well? Is there anything I would do differently? Did the partners who are involved get what they needed to out of it? And then thinking about what could go wrong. I had a mentor once who, well, he was really a statistician, and he was like, he would say to us when we were thinking about our analysis is, you need to think to yourself, how did I mess this up? Similar kind of idea in that, like, it's thinking about upfront. It's, it's difficult to think about putting things into a negative space in the beginning, but also you want to plan for these things. So what could go wrong? The time constraints pieces, resource limitations, student resistance is a thing. I think it's really more about fear of the unknown because they haven't ever done this before. And then partner issues, especially if you're working with nonprofits, there's a lot of turnover. It can, they have a lot of they have limited time. They have a lot of things pulling on them. It really just creates some challenges for them if this is not a top priority. So I think there's some other things that could be challenges, but really thinking collaboratively with your students and your partners about what are some potential barriers and how could we address those before they happen, if possible. Implementation. So this is where, you're starting to work with your students and partners if that's applicable. So introducing the project, setting realistic expectations. Again, there are a lot of amazing ideas that come about during the planning process, but helping them understand what are some of the things that we need to keep in mind. Time, the resources we have available to us, and ensuring that there's only so much you can do in a set amount of time is really essential. Setting learning objectives collaboratively, again, so you have these general ideas, but what else, or can we make them more specific? Explaining assessment criteria, of course, that's, very similar to like if you were in a class setting, like what's in the syllabus. But again, like how will we know that you learned what you set out to learn in the end? And then you'll probably have to answer about 1,000 questions, or maybe you decide not to answer those questions. It's okay to say, I don't know, actually, because we can't plan every little piece or minute of this project. So we don't know what we don't know. And then management, incentivize active participation. So I think this is very specific to the group of people that you're working with, but if you have a large class, sometimes people aren't as invested as others. And so how can we make sure that we reward those people who are doing that, and that the others see that there is value in participating in these projects? Providing guided practice for challenging tasks and giving appropriate feedback. These experiences often put people in a place where they feel uncomfortable. And so if you know that those things are coming, make sure that you have an opportunity to practice before they actually have to do it. Otherwise, I think that you'll find that people will struggle through that and feel like they were underprepared. And then fostering a collaborative learning environment and encouraging questions and idea sharing. So, even though you may have done this before, you've done this many times, there's so much to learn. There's so many different opportunities and options. So, your students and or your partners have ideas too. So make sure that you're open to those things. And then you yourself be flexible. We have these plans for how we think things should go. And then, it doesn't work out that way. It never works out that way. Actually, I have plans for all the things I do, and it never works out the way that it's supposed to. That's okay. So, but you're the example for your student and for your partners. So it's okay to say that things didn't work out. That's fine. Like, we're going to adjust and move on, but don't, start panicking. And then evaluation. So we talked a little bit about this already, but I think it's really important that you're employing this throughout the semester as opposed to everything at the end. This is where it gets super stressful for everyone. So it's, I think, good to avoid high stakes assignments and consider a scaffolding approach so that like you're building up to something that at the end, but not everything is at the end. I think you'll end up having a higher quality product, or the students will be able to meet their learning objectives much easier in a much easier and less stressful manner if they have the opportunity to do it through 16 weeks as opposed to in 2 weeks. So evaluating for learning outcomes, student engagement, satisfaction, and skill development. And then finally, this last part, reflection. This should be a part of any kind of experiential learning opportunity, but make sure you're choosing things that they're going to take seriously. AI is a wonderful tool if we use it appropriately, but sometimes students don't, and they'll plug things into ChatGPT and say, reflect on this learning experience, and what did they get out of that? So, you can't tackle all of that. It is what it is, but maybe there are other options that will allow students to be able to reflect in a lot of different ways. Next slide. And then I wanted to just give a quick example of a project that we did, or actually it's something we do every year. We have a sequence that involves a research course, undergrad research course. They take research the first semester, and then in the second semester, they do a community and group practice in social work. So from 2020 to 2022, so 2 years, we did projects on homelessness and housing. This was with our juniors who in the Department of Social Work, and it was focused in Cache Valley. And all those benefits that Mateja talked about, these quotes, I think represent a couple of those benefits. So one student said, something that I wish I had changed was taking it seriously at the beginning. I was doing it because it was an assignment, and I now am invested because I care about the lives of others. And then the other student, the project gave me the opportunity to follow real social work out from beginning to end, and could help remind me that I can start out by knowing very little about something, but with hard work, I can become adequately equipped to be able to contribute to the thing I used to know very little about. And so this information, we published a journal article, and that is in the reference section. You can read more. Thanks.
Great. I am going to finish up our presentation by talking about, sorry about that, the 3 stages of identifying partners, engaging partners, and maintaining those partnerships so that you don't always necessarily need to find new partners for these experiences for your students. And as we heard throughout, we know meaningful partnerships are a really important component of successful experiential learning opportunities. And as Jayme mentioned, identifying partners and projects that are mutually beneficial for our students and our program, as well as for our partners, is going to all around be a more successful opportunity for everyone. It will have students invested, as well as our partnering organizations understanding that they are also going to be gaining something from this experience. And I think one of the most intimidating parts, whether you are creating a class or program-based community engaged project, or finding individuals for service learning projects for your students, one of the most overwhelming parts can be figuring out who to even reach out to initially. So identifying those partners. And the process that I've always used is just starting with who you know. I think you can really find a wealth of knowledge and experiences just within your even small professional network. And within that network, if you don't find exactly what you're looking for the experience, asking your network who they know, or asking your colleagues who they would recommend that you reach out to. And I think it goes a really far way to do a little bit of research into those potential partners, even if you know them professionally to some extent, maybe looking into their LinkedIn profiles, or if they have bios posted on their organization website, so that you have a little bit of an understanding of the different experiences and background that they have and they may be bringing to the table. As well as it shows when you do initially reach out to them that you've done a little bit of research and that you've been really thoughtful about identifying who you're asking to engage in this process with you and your students. Another important piece that kind of comes along the process and is hard to identify right at the beginning is finding those individuals who are willing to serve as mentors for your students, as compared to people who are more just task oriented and looking for, people to kind of do maybe busy work within their organization. So finding individuals who are willing to, or who are more invested in the development of your students, as potentially helping build up the incoming workforce for the field that they currently work in. And again, that's something that you may not identify right at the beginning of a partnership. It's something you probably will identify over time as you work with different individuals and they understand the experience as a whole and the mutually beneficial aspects to it. So once you've identified those that you're going to reach out to, you'll start engaging with those partners. And I think one of the most important things up front, again, whether you're doing a more involved community engaged process or something a little bit more short term for your students, is sharing the time commitment and expectations with your partners. And depending on their level of involvement in the planning process, this certainly can evolve over the course of the opportunity. So if you're bringing them in early on, these time commitments and expectations may morph or evolve as you go through, but keeping that open communication through that mechanism, that agreed upon mechanism that Jayme was talking about, can be a really important component to making sure everyone continues to be on the same page and support of the opportunity as a whole. Like I mentioned, engaging partners in the planning process as early as possible. And this is going to help build their investment in the opportunity to ensure that it is a mutually beneficial experience for everyone. And when you pull them into that planning process at the beginning or as early as you can, be sure to ask them a lot of questions. And this was also included in the needs assessment questions that Jayme just referred to. So asking about the needs, resources, and strengths of that specific partner or the organization, again, kind of focusing on what needs they have that your students can help fulfill. What skills and knowledge students can potentially gain from this partnership with the individual or the organization. And then another important part that, again, was previously mentioned, what do students need to know before starting the work so that you can build in any type of training component necessary so students are ready to put their best foot forward day one or early on in the process. And creating shared goals. So inviting people into the planning process as early as possible. Of course, as mentioned, if your program is competency-based, or you might just have some learning objectives built in that are inherent to the course, and the organization might also have some specific goals for the experience, but find where those goals can cross over and create some shared goals together, taking that collaborative approach to create a more beneficial opportunity for everyone. Another successful strategy is inviting partners into the classroom, and this can be at different level or different points within the project. So of course, inviting partners in to introduce themselves in the organization and the work that they do, whether that's to a small group of students that may be working with them or even an individual student or the entire classroom. You can also bring them in when you are teaching students some of the skills they may need to know before heading out into the field or out into their experiential learning opportunity, or at any other point so that they can hear what the students are getting from you, but also have the opportunity to provide their insights throughout this process. And I know this certainly isn't always feasible. I think it's become more feasible as we've become more accustomed to using Zoom and allowing people just to zoom in quickly. But I think even just offering the invitation, even if it's not taken up on, is still a good strategy for engaging partners and really getting the investment of our partners early on in the experience. Something that we learned, even with graduate students, prepare students for making contact with mentors. So this, again, can vary based on the experience you've built into your course. If you're having students maybe cold call or cold emailing different people within your network that you know have agreed to serve as mentors for different projects that you may have, giving them just some quick tips on how to identify if they should call someone or they should send an email, the do's and don'ts of professional emails, just so they make a really good first impression to get the partner excited about working with that specific student. And then depending on the experience, consider a written agreement. So in our MPH program, in our Intro to Public Health course, we have a 10-hour professional service assignment where they have to find an organization within the field that they're interested in potentially going into just to learn more about that organization and provide some form of service. So for something like that, we don't have a written agreement. But for our students' final capstone project, their applied practice experience, we do have a learning contract that is a contract between the student, the preceptor or partner, and the faculty advisor that outlines the projects that they've agreed upon that are beneficial for the student to gain the competencies they're interested in gaining, as well as for the organization to fill a need within in the organization. It has a timeline, and it has how those different projects are going to fulfill those different competencies. And it's something that is signed by all three members. And it serves as a really nice foundation to just serve as a reminder of the intention and the goal behind the project. so that if anyone gets off course, you can always refer back to it. So for something a little bit more complex and more significant time commitment for both the partner and the student, something like this type of written agreement could be beneficial. And then finally, maintaining partnerships. Again, you may develop new experiences that need new partnerships, but it's nice when you can draw from from previous partnerships for some of the different shorter term experiences for your students. So you want to be sure to maintain those partnerships throughout this entire process so that you have a wide net to choose from in the future. So of course, clear and frequent communications through that communication mechanism that Jayme was talking about, even just reaching out to the partner and saying, how are things going? Do you have any comments or concerns or questions that I can help answer for you, just to keep that line of communication open. Building in career development, again, this would be specific, this would be dependent on the students you have, where they are in the program and the different experience that you've built, that you've designed. But for our MPH students at the end, when they're doing their final capstone project, we really like them to look at it as building their professional network that might potentially lead to their first job after completing the program. And on the other side of it, allowing your partners to recognize these mentoring opportunities as a way to maybe have a pool of great students who could fill open job positions within their organization. So this is a great opportunity for larger organizations like the Department of Health and Human Services, so that when they have these open positions, maybe they have some experience with some students that have been really a great asset to their program to apply for those jobs. Matching student interest or skill to organization. So this one, again, is really dependent. If you do have partners that are willing to serve in this capacity for more than one opportunity, you'll kind of get to know what that partner or organization kind of values within a student and the types of skills that really enhance the experience for them. And depending on how well you know your students, in the MPH program, we're lucky enough to know our students pretty well and the skills that they bring to the table, trying to match those together so that just to increase the likelihood that this will be a successful partnership for everybody. As both Mateja and Jayme talked about, ample opportunities for reflection and input from both students and partners. And just to add on to what they both said, not only allowing for students and partners to give you that reflective input, but also reaching back out to them about how you're going to address that input. If there was a problem or a concern, how are you going to potentially adjust the experience next time to show that you're really considering their feedback? Or if it's something that isn't feasible, letting them know why that's, thanking them for their feedback, but that might not be feasible because of X, Y, and Z. It just shows that the time they've put into that reflection was worth it and is valued by you as a program, and you're willing to make changes based on that to make it work for everybody. And then finally, recognizing contributions. Before my current position within the Department of Nutrition, Dietetics, and Food Sciences, I worked for Extension. And we have a lot of community partners where our program's really reliant on community partners. And we started doing a community partner recognition dinner and inviting some of our best partners around the state that were submitted by the people that they've worked with in their counties, and provided them a plaque and just recognition of the work that they've done to support the work of our program. And it really meant a lot to a lot of partners. So a small gesture like that, even if it's not a dinner and a plaque, but any form of recognition and gratitude can really go a long way as to maintaining these partners and having them be willing to come back to provide these experiences for your students. That's all we have for you today. Here's our references. And then I also just wanted to put up this slide. If you have any questions about anything shared today, we are more than happy to answer those. So feel free to reach out to any of us. And thank you for your time.